Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Thumbnail Hill Podcast, Spooky Season Edition. I am so stoked about this episode because I'm just excited. I am now living in California. If you don't follow the vlog, I moved. And I'm in a place where the seasons aren't changing. And so, like, the traditional spookiness of the season is, like, not happening. So I'm doing my best to really just embrace Halloween in all of the ways that I can. While I'm out here. And part of that is going to be reminiscing on some spooky stories. I have some that have been around in my family for a long time. I got some submissions from listeners, so I'm really excited to dive into those. And I want to thank you all for being here. I want to go over some housekeeping stuff, but I want to give you what you want. I want to give the people what they want. So I'm just going to jump in and I guess we'll do some housekeeping stuff at the end. But it's exciting for me to share this stuff with you, so I hope that you listen all the way through. One of my favorite podcasts, My Favorite Murder, they do like hometown submission stories where people send in their hometown murders. And this was partially inspired by that because I know that people who follow me on Instagram and everything have spooky stories. I know that for a fact, like including my friends, whatever. And so I thought, why not get the listeners and people that I know involved and share more than just my stories? Let's share everyone's stories. And then if you all like this format, maybe I'll do some sort of similar stuff like this throughout the year where I get like listener input. But anyway, I'm really just excited because I want to just embrace the holiday season, the Halloween season. I have my coffee here. Yes, I'm drinking coffee at 6:15 p.m. What else is new? But I guess I'll just start with a spooky story of my own. It's funny because I never thought that like scary ghost stories would be what makes me feel close to my mom. Especially because she never believed in like ghosts or anything like that, but she had multiple sort of like ghost encounter experiences, and whether she believed in it or really thought that it was people from the afterlife or not, it's just funny to me that she never believed in them, but she always had these experiences to share. And now I communicate with her through the afterlife. So this episode's dedicated to you, Mom. Thank you for always spookifying me and my friends' sleepovers growing up, and for sharing these stories, whether or not you believed in them or not. Okay, let's dive in. So when my mom was little, their family had a farm up in Wisconsin. It was like her cousin's farm or something like that. Someone in the family. And this had to be like 70s, 80s, something like that, that time. So put yourself in like the late 70s. Put yourself in the late 70s, okay? All the parents are having a party, okay? And it's a house with a barn. There's stables with horses and, some other probably goats and things, some basic farm animals. And it's a party. So, all the adults are drinking, all the kids are running around being crazy little kids. There's a lot of them because, again, it's like the late 70s. Like, everyone has 100 kids. My mom had 3 brothers. So all the cousins are there, whatever. The parents are drinking. In this house, it was an old farmhouse, and from the upstairs, there was like a sheet, like at the top of the stairs where, it would keep the draft out. There was an old legend of the farmhouse that someone who used to live there died there, and her name was Norma. And I'm sure, this was an old building. I'm sure many people lived and died there, truthfully, over time. But young kids, they liked to spook each other a little bit. My mom's brothers are all older than her. Living with 4 older brothers, I could only imagine what that was like. Plus all the cousins, everyone's messing around, being loud, obnoxious kids. And somehow they get on the subject of Norma. They're riffing on each other and saying, well, Norma's going to come get you, this, that, and the other, calling her out by name, telling the scary stories, probably what they made up from what they'd heard from their family in the past. And Norma, and these kids are, some of them are getting scared, some of them are laughing, and all of a sudden, the sheet that kept the drafts out started swaying back and forth, and there's a wind that comes through. All the windows are closed and there's still a draft. There's a breeze that's coming through and the kids are freaking out. They run downstairs and they're telling the parents that there's this breeze, and all of a sudden they hear the horses going crazy, neighing and galloping, and they break through the fencing and they're running through the fields. And all the parents are like, what is going on? The horses have escaped. They're running through the fields. Everyone's freaking out, thinking, what is going on? What's making the horses freak out so bad? And the kids are like, well, no, it was the fact that the draft was coming in and the wind was coming from nowhere. There's no open windows and the kids are freaking out, which was making the parents freak out, thinking what happened to all these animals. And when everyone gets back inside, everything's calm. Everything is calm again. Nothing is moving. There's no draft. No wind is coming through the windows or making the sheet move. And the only explanation that the kids or anyone can think of is that it was Norma. She was sick of kids laughing at her, making fun of her, making fun out of her death and her existence. And so she had to scare the life out of them a little bit, show them who they're messing with. And of course, my mom would always have done a way better job of explaining the story. Plus, she was there. And even in her final moments, she never believed in ghosts. So much has changed throughout the decades now that I don't even know who owns the farm or how we would even find who owns the farm anymore. But I could bet you that Norma still haunts that upstairs and still freaks the kids out when they're telling her ghost stories. So let's jump into some listener stories. This one is from someone named Ellie. One time when I was a kid, I was at my father's house in the country in Wisconsin. What is with everything happening in Wisconsin, okay? It was around Halloween time. I was in bed and woken up by what felt like someone punching the bottom of my bed and or shaking it. I was so terrified that I literally just froze. Finally, I got up the courage after what felt like a couple of hours to jump off of the bed and run into my parents' room. They were both asleep. They were both such crazy sleepers. My dad was snoring and my mom always talked in her sleep. So I just decided to rack up the courage and go back to whatever was in my room. Whatever it was gone by then. Okay, not to be dramatic, but while I was recording this, my humidifier just turned on. And what? Why did that happen? I have saged this place. Please keep me safe. Why did that just happen? Okay. Anyway, thank you, Ellie, for sharing that story. That's always so hard to discern sometimes when you're asleep. What is real and what's not? Because I have had some crazy dreams where I wake up and I'm like, did I hear that? Or was that in my dream? And then I just woke up and it felt so real. Or did I actually hear that knocking? Did I actually feel that thing? It's always really hard to discern, and not to jump in and go completely off topic, but talk about theories of the human existence. But I heard this theory once of how your dreams, when you're dreaming, you're just in a different reality because you're kind of crossing that veil in between a different universe kind of thing, a different part of the multiverse, I guess. And I don't know, I feel like those weird situations where you're half asleep, half awake are the moments of you crossing over. And I just am so intrigued by that. So I'm glad to know that you're alive and well after that situation. And thank you for submitting your story. Next, I actually know who this one's from, even though there was no name left on it. And I've heard this story before. It's so crazy to me. I just remember the time of our lives when this is happening. But so here goes. When I was in middle school, I had a dream my neighbor was pregnant. One night, I woke up to my pet bunny going crazy in the middle of the night. I sat up and saw a little blonde girl kneeling by my bunny cage. I panicked and turned the nightlight on, and then she was gone. Later on that week, my friend spotted a blonde run past my house, so we opened the front door, but no one was there. A few weeks later, we found out that my neighbor was pregnant. Was it the unborn? Was it a coincidence? Or was it the dead? That is so spooky because I also literally remember being in that with this person who wrote the story. I remember hearing about it in real time, and the just series of events, one thing after another, was a crazy time. So thank you for submitting your story. I have another one here from a YouTube viewer. So thank you. It is not signed with a name, but it says, "Hi there from Tuber Chat. I have a true story. When I was about 10 years old, my mom's boyfriend lived with us, and he was into plastic model kits. He used an X-Acto knife to put them together a lot. One time, he had lost the knife, so we all went around the house looking for it. We looked at the table where he worked, the TV, the dining room table, etc. We looked around for about 2 hours or more, but we couldn't find it anywhere, so we gave up. Suddenly, my mom turned around, and guess what was sitting right on top of the TV in plain sight? The knife. All of us had looked there many times, even my mom, so we were all a little shaken up when she found it. Had it disappeared into the Matrix or into another dimension? That's the thing, dude. When things like that happen, literally, it makes you question things like why or how. Or when it's like, it's kind of like that, the Mandela effect, how like you remember things being one way, but they're a different way in reality or in like your perceived reality. And it's kind of like that. It's like, you know that it was somewhere, you know that you've looked there multiple times. How come all of a sudden it like showed itself? You know what I mean? Like it is wild. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I am literally like, I'm home alone and I'm getting a little bit freaked out because the sun is setting, and talk about embracing the Halloween time. I'm going to share another story that was kind of like, I don't remember whose story it was exactly. It was like my mom's best friend's cousin, I think. But this story had been told so many times by my mom to like me and my friends. And so I just remember the story. So a friend of a friend, will just say, they were pregnant and having a baby. As soon as the baby arrived, an existing kid, who was about like 5 years old, shared a room with the baby. And night after night, the kid would wake up and tell the parents, there's someone at my brother's window. There's someone at my brother's window. But they lived on the second story. And so the parents were like, it's an overactive imagination, or maybe something of trying to get attention. Because, you know, when a new baby comes, it changes the attention that the firstborn gets, things like that. So the parents just kept brushing it off. Well, one night, unfortunately, the baby died of crib death in the middle of the night. And the first son told the parents, it's because I saw the man. It was the man that I've been seeing in the window. And again, the parents just brushed it off, maybe thinking that this is some way that their child is coping with this really traumatic experience. And now the kids had never gone to church. They weren't a religious family. But when it was time for the services for the now deceased child, it was held at a church, of course. When the young boy walked into the church, he kept tugging on his mom. And eventually she said, "What? What is it?" And he looked up at the cross of Jesus on the cross, and he said, "That was the man in our window." The reason why this is even crazier is the fact that the kid was never exposed to what Jesus would have looked like because the family was not religious. And this story has always given me such a shiver, thinking like, whether you're religious or not, whether you buy into it or not, I just feel like that can't be coincidence. Like this young kid, 5 years old, like how do you just make something like that up? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So here's another listener story. It says, "Hello, my name is Keith Bryant." Shout out to you, Keith. He makes music and he's a streamer on YouTube. "This is my spooky story. I remember this to this day, but it happened to me back in 2017 or 2018. I was taking out the trash at around 8 p.m., living in a rural neighborhood, and it was dark at the time. I heard a random voice yelling from behind me, 'Sir, sir,' when I was putting the trash in the bin. I turned around and turned back, and then I heard it again. Without hesitating and a lot of anxiety in me, I ran back into the house and locked the door, promising myself to never take the garbage out again at night. So to this day, as long as it's daylight, I'll take out the trash because I could never explain who was yelling and if they were yelling at me." That is so freaky because it's like, even though you live there and it's your neighborhood and this happens to me all the time, like even in a place that I'm very familiar with, I get freaked out at noises that I don't know, especially when it's dark out. You can't see. Like I would have done the same thing that you would have done, and I would have ran back inside and not taken the trash out ever again and at night. So I have one more listener story, and then I'll do one more of my own personal stories that have been passed down through the family. So this one is not signed either, but thank you for sending in this story. Also, thank you because I know exactly where you're talking about, and I've been to the bar slash coffee shop that I think you're referring to in this story. So I'm excited to share this one. Here goes. So I live near Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois, and it's a very famous haunted cemetery where Resurrection Mary used to walk down Old Archer Road. She would get picked up while hitchhiking and would have drivers drop her off in the middle of the woods where she would just disappear. People would also break into the cemetery at night and swear they saw her walking around. For years, you could see her handprints on the rear gates of the cemetery until they were repainted over. There's a bar across the street, and people would see her leave and walk into the cemetery and disappear into the fog. I've heard these stories most of my life, and I never really believed any of them until something happened to me. When I was a teenager, I drove home late at night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and back then the street was very dark. I looked through my rearview mirror to see a young girl sitting in my back seat. I nearly pissed myself, so I slammed on the brakes and turned around, but she was gone. To this day, when I drive down that part of the Old Archer late at night, I still get the goosebumps. Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about because there's a coffee shop there that's well known and known to be haunted. And oh my gosh, I guess this will just segue into a different story that I wasn't planning on telling, but we once asked one of the girls who worked there at this coffee shop if she'd ever had anything crazy happen to her, and she said that when she's closing late at night by herself, she will hear like opera singing. And honestly, if you do research into this location, there are so many sightings. Like, you're exactly right. Like, there have been so many sightings of Resurrection Mary, and we have like run in and through those woods before. Like, oh my God, there's creepy stuff back there. Like, there is crosses in the field, in those woods, like creepy stuff. I don't even know. I don't know if she was killed around there or what her story is, but there have been so many sightings and even stories of like that. There's a big, what's the word I'm looking for? There's like a event hall, like they host like weddings and stuff. And it's a very old building, and there have been like sightings and rumors of like her going to events there and like showing up, or that she was leaving one of those events when she was killed. Like a ton of crazy stories. I mean, a lot of it could definitely be hearsay. I'm clearly glad that you're safe, and that it's so scary. Like, with my overactive imagination, like if I was driving down that road, I feel like I would have seen the same thing, because you're like hyper aware of where you're going, where you are, all of the stories, especially, again, it's really dark outside. Like, you don't know. And oh my God, one time these are all these segues. One time my friends and I were driving through that cemetery, but it was like about to be closing. It was dark outside already. And literally I was driving and I was like, literally, no, I'm leaving. I was so freaked out. It was dark, and I really thought that the cemetery gates were going to close and lock us in, and I literally would not have survived the night. I'm pretty sure. And I literally got us out of there so quick. My friends were like, you're being such a wuss and ridiculous about this. And I was like, I don't even care, because you don't know. You don't know. So anyway, thank you for sharing that story. And I'm glad that I could relate to it too. Yeah, I honestly love the spooky stuff. I love it, but it also freaks me out. Okay, so my last story that I will talk about really quick. Again, I believe it was my aunt's story. So she was visiting a friend in an apartment building. And when she pulled up, she was going to park on the street, and she like saw into the window. It was like a 4th floor window of the apartment. She saw a lady that obviously wasn't her friend. So she was like confused. She thought that the two of them were just meeting up, whatever. So she gets upstairs and they start talking, whatever. And she's like, who was that was in your window? Where did that lady go? And the friend freaks out. She's like, hold on, what are you talking about? She had been hearing like running back and forth in her apartment periodically over the past couple months. She couldn't figure out what it was. She thought it was someone above her living next door maybe. But it would always happen at the weirdest times, and often at the same time over and over again. And turns out before this apartment building was renovated, there was a tornado that hit. And there was a family, a woman and her 2 sons, who were killed by the tornado. But the running back and forth that she was hearing was the mom running back and forth, trying to prepare her kids to escape before the tornado hit. Unfortunately, they weren't lucky enough. So the running back and forth that she was hearing, and the woman in the window that my aunt saw, was the ghost of the lady who lived there and unfortunately didn't survive. And while I was telling that story, I actually had another story pop into my head that I don't know how I didn't think of this immediately to tell on this episode. Okay, the house I grew up in was not haunted, but when we were growing up, my sister and I always heard this weird like moaning from a couple doors down. And we were young, right? And it was like kind of a thrill to be like, oh, it's haunted, it's haunted. We thought that this was the property that was haunted because two doors down in their backyard, there was an old, almost like burnt looking tree house up in a tree. It looked like it had caught fire, but then went out, and that no one had been up there for like 20 years. And we would always hear like these like moaning, like it sounded like a muffled speaking on a microphone. And so our parents always explained it to us that the car dealership that was down the block, it was them speaking over the megaphone. Okay. Fast forward like 12, 15 years, right? The house goes up for sale. And I no longer live in the house that was down the block, but my aunt does. And my aunt's daughter, okay, so my cousin decides to move in to the house that's two doors down, the one that we always said was haunted. Now, at this point, we're old enough, we don't really buy into it anymore. We're just kind of like joking about, it was always haunted, blah, blah, blah. But once my cousin moves in, there starts being some crazy events happening. And the one that I can attest to because I was there and experienced it was a time that I was babysitting. At the time, she had twins, okay? At the time, they were about 2. They still were in cribs, so maybe like 1. I don't know. They were little. Okay, and I was babysitting them with a friend, mind you. I was not in this house alone. And my cousin warned me on their way out. She said, don't worry about the ghost. Just don't go upstairs. And I'm like laughing and giggling. I'm kind of like, wait, like for real? Haha. She's like, yeah, we just don't go upstairs because, we just use it as storage. Just don't go upstairs. You'll be fine. So my friend and I are babysitting. The kids are asleep, obviously, the twins, because it's like 8 o'clock and babies sleep all of the time. And we're watching Friends, okay? First, I swore to God, I heard the girls crying. I go in there and no one is crying, okay? So I'm like, whatever. Maybe it was the TV. I didn't realize it. Okay, tell me why we hear walking above us upstairs. I shit you not. My friend and I literally huddled at the corner of the couch for the next 3 hours until my cousin got home. Like we would not move off the couch. I was like, there's no way I'm even stepping towards those stairs. I'm not fucking checking up there. I can't leave the girls. Like, what am I going to do? They're literally babies in their sleep. What is going to happen? So that was pretty much all because I was so scared that I couldn't move. Like literally could not move until my cousin came home and was like, oh, is everything okay? Like, how was it? And I'm like, it was fine, but I literally heard the ghost and I will never be watching your girls again. Thank you. And I think I did watch them again, but not in the house at night. So there's that. But anyway, thank you so much for clicking and celebrating Halloween with me. Honestly, some of these, I feel like I should have like scripted this out a little more because it was kind of hard for me to explain everything I was thinking in my brain. So I'm sorry if this was really choppy. Because I'm so used to hearing the stories, not repeating them back, right? But anyway, a few announcements that I just want to let you know. Vlogtober is alive and well on my vlog channel, on my adventure vlog over on YouTube. If you haven't checked it out or subscribed, go and do that. There's Disney Halloween. We went to Not Scary Farm in LA. Just a lot of fun stuff happening there. And I would love it if you would join. I also am launching channel memberships this month, which is super exciting. It's just another way that you can support me as a creator. It gets you access to exclusive content, so things that I'm just sharing for members, which is really exciting. So there's a lot of cool things coming up soon. So if you want to check that out, I would love it. And there's a lot more coming, you guys. There's so many adventures that are in the next few months. And like I'm literally through the end of the year, my videos are already like booked out. But anyway, thank you all so much for participating as well as listening here. I just really love Halloween, and I was hoping that there would be another way that I could celebrate it with the podcast here. So I am going to give you a song recommendation based on my on repeat that's been on repeat from Spotify. This is my favorite part of the episode every week because I get to share with you some cool tunes, and music's what make the world go go wrong, go round. And I'm excited because this week, this is awesome. I was hoping it would be a spooky-ish song. This song is called Oral Hex by Bloody Nymph. It's a kind of like a spicy, like pop EDM song, but it's spookified. Like, it is perfect for the Halloween season. I found it last year when I was creating the playlist for our Halloween party, and it's literally such a jam, such a vibe. So check that out. It'll be linked in the description of the podcast. And if you liked the format of this, if you liked being able to submit, let me know what you thought. You can always reach me on Instagram through DMs. My DMs are always open. And you can also, I'd love to take recommendations of what you'd like to hear on the podcast, what you'd like me to talk about, guests you would like me to have, etc., etc. I want this to be a community. So let me know all of your thoughts. And again, thank you so much for being here and celebrating Halloween with me. I'll see you soon.